Sankofa, back to the source. Sankofa, back where our ancestors came. Back to the source. Sankofa.
Hotel, peace. My name is Baba Andar Ma'at. Welcome to the first edition of Sankofa, Lessons from Black History. First, Sankofa is a word from the Twi language of Ghana. It translates to mean, go back and fetch it, return to the source, go back and get that which you need. Now, Sankofa also refers to an Adinkra symbol of the Ashanti people from West Africa. Now, an Adinkra symbol it represents concepts and ideas that transmits messages or conveys traditional wisdom. As we know, a word is worth a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes just in a symbol, you can get so many meanings. Now, when it comes down to the Adinkra symbols, if you were to go to West Africa, you may see these symbols in the clothes that the people wear. It may be in the pottery that they make. You'll find it sometime constructed on the walls of the houses. See, the symbols you will find everywhere within the society. Why? Because the symbols are there to remind the people of the history, the traditional values, and the beliefs of the people. Now, when you look at the symbol of Sankofa, it's a very interesting symbol because you look at the Sankofa bird. It's a picture of a mythic bird with its feet facing forward. Its head is turned backwards. And in the mouth of the bird, you may see an egg. Well, this is a very powerful symbol because the feet facing forward reminds us of the present, of where we stand, but also lets us know that we are moving into the future. The head is turned backwards to remind us that we need to always look back and study from our past, study our history, so we can gain great lessons that will help us move correctly into the future. And the egg is symbolic because it represents potential and possibility of a prosperous future. See, in essence, the Sankofa represents the need to reflect on the past, learn the lessons of the past in order that we may better understand the present and can build a greater future. This is the significance of the Sankofa bird, an Adinkra symbol. For our program, Sankofa, Lessons from Black History, we want to learn and share Black history, African history. And from that, we want to extract very valuable lessons that we may gain greater knowledge of the present and help us to plan and prepare for a brighter future. Sankofa, Lessons from Black History. Now, for today, we want to share with you the title theme, The Importance of Black History, the words and wisdom of our ancestors. First, we want to share with you a quote from the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. Marcus Garvey was a great leader, a Pan-Africanist, a black nationalist in the early 1900s. He came from Jamaica to the United States, started an organization called the United Negro Improvement Association. And from that organization, he inspired millions of African Americans and people around the world to learn about Africa, the greatness of themselves, and to study the history. He said, a people without the knowledge of history is like a tree without roots. We all know what happens to a tree without roots. Eventually, that tree will die. Well, what happens to a people that loses the knowledge of themselves? Well, first of all, we know that from the roots of the tree, the roots absorb, it draws in the nutrients that are needed by that tree to live. Likewise, the history of a people gives them knowledge of themselves, gives them greater awareness of their potential and possibility. It gives them self-esteem, and it gives them a vision of what they once did and what they can do. See, knowledge of our history is important. Now, as African Americans, many times we think our roots may begin in slavery, and we must correct that because our roots extend beyond slavery and extends beyond the shores of America. In fact, our roots go back to Africa, the motherland of humanity and civilization. In 1974, there was a team of Ethiopian archaeologists. They found the skeleton fossil remains of a woman in Africa. According to the carbon data test, they estimated that the age of that fossil remain of that woman was 3.2 million years of age. Now, they called her Lucy, but the Africans called her Dinknesh, meaning you are lovely. More recently, genetic researchers have uncovered that the mitochondria DNA, which is found really that is passed through the woman, they have traced it back to Africa and basically have come to the conclusion that all people are children of an African woman. Now, so in essence, black people are the original people of humanity and civilization. And it is said that we should honor our mothers and fathers so our days may be long. This is an important lesson because it is important that we know and teach black people are the roots of humanity and civilization. So it will help us to better understand and appreciate the true value of black life. Now, the second quote is from Arthur Schomburg. He was a great historian. And in New York, they have the Schomburg Library and Cultural Center, named in his honor. Well, he said, African history, Negro history, is the missing pages of world history. If you had a book and it had 10 chapters, and the first 5 chapters were missing, that book would be incomplete. It would be lacking the full knowledge that you need. Did you know that African history is the beginning pages of world history? As a matter of fact, we could say that the first 5 pages of world history is really African history. Example, did you know in Egypt, the Africans of ancient Egypt, at that time they called it Kemet, the land of the blacks. Well, they had gone into understanding and documenting the knowledge of astronomy. They wrote in the papyrus, the Carlsberg papyrus, they said that Africans had divided the year into 12 months. They had created a 24-hour day and had the use of the 365-day calendar year, which is what we are using currently. So thousands of years ago, African had documented this information. But this is the missing pages of history. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is one of the oldest medical texts found in ancient Kemet, where they diagnosed and treated over 200 diseases. The Ryan Smith Papyrus is a mathematical text found thousands of years ago in Africa. The Pyramid text is the oldest religious text found in Africa. What I'm saying, we don't know the whole story. And we cannot teach what we do not know. So we must know Black history in order to share and teach world history. Then there was a quote by a great civil rights leader, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer said, "Never forget where you came from and always praise the bridges that carried us over." The bridge that brought us this far, the path that we walk on, is paved with the blood, sweat, and tears of African people in America. And we're obligated to acknowledge and share the stories of their courage, sacrifice, and determination to build a better world. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner, Ida B. Wells, Martin Delany, Sojourner Truth. These are noble and notable men and women of history that lived and fought and bled and cried and died so that we could be free and have a better world. But also, we must remember that we have people within our family members that grew up, that were in our community. These are ancestors we should also raise up and remember because they were close and dear. Our great-grandparents, our great-grandmothers and grandfathers, our aunts and uncles, those who lived in our community that shared a kind word that protected us and guided us and loved us. We should raise them up and honor them because not all of us made the history books. Our names are not recorded in the history books, but they are recorded in the heads and hearts of the people, and that's us. And we should always remember them and speak of them. It is said in the African tradition that you are never truly dead unless your name is no longer mentioned. Your deeds are forgotten. But you can live forever if your children remember your name, speak your words, speak your deeds, and pass it down from generation to generation. We have a responsibility through our history to share the knowledge of our ancestors. And we only hope and pray that as we do today for those who came before us, our children will do for us. Now, there was an educator named Mr. Kelly Miller. He was a great educator at Howard University in the early 1900s. He said that all great people glorify their history. All great people glorify their history. They write books about them. They make movies about them. They name cities and streets about them, their ancestors. They create holidays to honor their ancestors because this is a way of glorifying their history. All great people do this. Because when you can see the greatness of your ancestors in your history, you can see the greatness of yourself. Because we are an extension of our ancestors. We are a continuation of our ancestors. And what our ancestors have done tell us what we can do. One of our great historians said, Joseph Ben Yaakman said, religion is the deification of our culture. And I add the deification of our history. When we read the Bible, we're reading the history of a people. Yes, we're reading the history of a people. If the text is sacred, the people are sacred, and their descendants are sacred. Think about this. Like Moses, Harriet Tubman delivered her people from bondage. Like Moses, Elijah Muhammad built a nation. Marcus Garvey was a prophet. God told Isabel Bonfrey to change her name. He said, your name is to be Sojourner Truth because you are commanded to journey around this country telling the truth about the wrongs of slavery. Sojourner Truth was a saint. Our history is filled with saints and prophets and messengers and kings, queens, and saviors. Because all people glorify their history. It is said that we should study the words and the works of our ancestors and follow their wise counsel. This is a lesson from our history. The late Dr. Great John Henry Clark, one of our great historians, he said that all history is current. All history is current. What happened 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 50 years ago, or 5 minutes ago impacts what we do and think today. Now, think about it. Around 4,000 years ago, Africans along the Nile River started to develop agricultural science. Think. They collected the seeds, they learned the seasons, they cultivated the land, they harnessed the Nile and irrigated the land. So today, we use agricultural science to feed cities and nations. This science has been passed down for thousands of years and developed. Think, thousands of years ago, Africans in ancient Egypt developed paper from the papyrus plant. And that's where we get the word paper from. And they developed a script called the Medu-Neter, and which we refer to as the hieroglyphics. Well, today, we use paper, and we write notes, and we write letters and books using paper. The point we're making is that what happened thousands of years ago still impacts and influences us today because we still are using these tools. We are made by history and we make history. I always say that the most important time is now, the present. Why? Because what we do today, the things we say today, will influence and impact and determine what happens 5 minutes from now, 50 years from now, or even 500 years from now. Think about it. History tells us what we do today could very well shape the future of humanity. And this is why history is so important, that we go back, return to the source as instructed by this symbol, Sankofa, the Sankofa bird, telling us go back, learn from the past, bring those lessons forward so we can use what we have learned from the history so we can build a greater future, because what we do today will shape tomorrow. In closing, I want to say Malcolm X, one of our great ancestors, he said, of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. Family, we must study our history because we must learn from the past. And I want us to be clear. We're not talking about going back, living in the past. We're talking about studying the past so we can gain that valuable information that will help us to think and see now and into the future. Think about it. Any field of study you go into, you are required to learn the history. Any field of study, we are required to learn the history of that field of study. If you go into psychology, you got to learn about all the great psychologists and their theories. If you go into the field of mathematics, you got to learn about all the mathematicians and their theories. Family, and all I'm saying is that we must return to the source and study our history. Because what humans have done tell us what humans can do. If our ancestors built the pyramids and great nations and developed great sciences around astrology and medicine, literature, then we should be engaged and involved in continuing to develop that. If our ancestors built great universities and schools, then we have the ability to build great universities and schools. Because in essence, history tells us we have all we need to do all the things we need to do to be the great people we are destined to be. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Sankofa, Lessons from Black History. Asante Sana. Thank you very much.
Sankofa.